Hi, welcome to the Corner of Knit and Tea, episode 515. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Twitter. No, I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Blue Sky. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes will be, and I sell my handspun yarn and knitting patterns in my Etsy shop, which is also called The Corner of Knit and Tea. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, March 31st. I can hardly believe we are done with the first quarter of the year. I hope that you are doing well. I have had some not so crafty times and some crafty times this week. In the last week since we spoke, several days last week, I was feeling really under the weather. I don't know if I had a minor virus or it was something that I was allergic to. Last Monday afternoon, I went out to run a quick errand and I had the whole allergic reaction where like I was sneezing, my eyes were itchy and red, something was not right. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, I didn't feel sick per se, but I didn't feel well either. Like I was a little lightheaded, a little bit of malaise, like just wasn't really sure what was going on and didn't get a lot of knitting done those days. Thursday was also kind of by Friday, I was feeling a little bit better. And then on Saturday, I had like big plans for the weekend. And so I was like, do I go? Do I not go? But I was feeling better, so I went. And Saturday morning, I ran the Liberty 5K. It is the first of a series of 3 runs that my husband and I run during the spring. He runs the half marathon, and then I do a 5K or a 10K, depending on what's there. So that morning, I got up and ran a 5K. And most years when we run this 5K, it is incredibly cold. Like last year when we did this 5K, it was probably 30 degrees out, and I ran with like running tights under sweats, and still didn't break a sweat the entire time because it was cold. Things have been crazy here. Last Friday was 87 degrees, and on Saturday morning, basically, it was 60 degrees when we started, and it was over 70 by the time we finished, and it was super humid. So it was really hot. I ran a little bit slower than I normally run because I don't like warm weather. It doesn't make me feel well, particularly when I'm exercising. So that was kind of that. But the other thing that I had going on was I had signed up for a sew day. So I am a member, I've talked about this now quite a bit. I'm a member of the local chapter of the Kansas City Modern Quilt Guild, and once a quarter they do a new member sew day. And technically I joined last August, so I'm not exactly a new member. I mean, I'm still a relatively new member, but I didn't originally sign up. And it turns out that the person who was in charge of the new member sew day is our new members chair. And she is one of the people that I sat with at the last sew day in February. And she was like, do you want to come? And I said, well, I'm not really a new member. And I wanted to leave the spots open for people who were brand new, who hadn't like been to anything yet. And she said, we've only got a couple of people signed up. You should totally come. And I was like, well, I'm running in the morning. And she was like, I don't care, just come. So I did. I went. It was great. I pieced together another chunk of a quilt top, which was kind of fun. I made a Halloween quilt top a couple of years ago, and it came from a fat quarter bundle, and I had all the leftovers from that fat quarter bundle, and I love the fabric. It was one of my favorite Halloween collections, but I was like, am I really gonna do another quilt in the exact same fabric to the one I already did? And I had only made a wall hanging, so it's about 36 by 36, so I still had a ton of fabric left. So I decided that I could make a kid's quilt to donate in Halloween fabric because kids love Halloween. It's super fun. And the collection is like cats and trees and bats and like it's not super kid friendly, but it's not kid friendly. It's also got stars and moons and, you know, all kinds of things. So I cut all of the leftover bits of fabric, that I had left. The last pattern that I did Dresden, but I did Dresden in squares. So I don't remember I don't remember how exactly I cut things. I used it. I took whatever was left and turned it all into 2.5 inch strips of varying length. So all were the same width, varying lengths. And I cut all of that fabric up, and then I kind of tossed it up in the air, and I just started sewing things together. And my thought was that I would make basically a jelly roll quilt from all of the leftover strips. And so I sewed them all together, and I was gonna turn it into like one big jelly roll, and then one big like huge round strip like one long strip, and then just cut the width that I need, because there are a variety of places that I look to donate, and one of the places I've been wanting to donate a quilt has very specific measurements for a quilt. They want it to be 38 by 50, and that is because it goes to kids who often are in hospital beds, and so 38 is like the widest the quilt can be to not interfere with hospital bed railing and cords and things like that, and then 50 is just a good kid's length. So basically what I wanted to do was I wanted to sew everything together in strips, and then basically cut strips that were 38 inches in length, so I'd have a 38-inch wide quilt, and then I would quilt 25 of them together, and 25 2.5-inch strips is going to give me 50 finished, because every 2.5-inch strip loses a 1/4 inch to each seam. So so that is what I was doing, and I ended up getting a lot of strips that were completely wide enough as they were, and so I didn't end up sewing them all together. Now basically all I have to do is piece those 25 strips together, and I've got a quilt top. And I actually ended up with, I think, 32 strips, which means I can just put the rest of those strips together and use them as scrappy binding. So I'm super thrilled. And then I had bought a big, a wide back cut of black Kona cotton. So I'm just going to put black on the back of the quilt, and then I thought I might quilt it with a spider web. So that was kind of the project that I worked on while I was at quilting day. And there's still lots more to be done, and I'm probably going to put it on hold to work on something else. Apparently my whole like work one quilt through to its finish is not really working. I'm doing it a little bit like knitting. I have a bunch of different things going. But I'm going to work on my negative space challenge quilt, and that is the one. So I have maybe one more session of free motion quilting, and then I need to put binding on the quilt that is currently in progress. And so my plan is to finish that, and then this coming weekend, I'm hoping maybe I can get the quilting done this week and get the binding sewn on this week, so then I can just do that as hand sewing on the couch while I'm watching TV to attach the binding to the back. And then my plan is to start working on my challenge quilt this weekend. So that was Saturday. Sorry, I realize I've really diverged into, I haven't even started talking about crafts yet, except I'm talking about crafts. So that was Saturday, and then on Sunday I went and got my nails done, and then I had a meeting of book club, a book club that I'm part of, and we discussed the book, which was really interesting. It is, do I still have it here? I think I took it back out to the couch. It is a book about the history of the notebook, like how basically, like originally we had clay tablets, and then in Egypt they had some wax tablets where they used, or maybe it wasn't Egypt, I can't remember. They had wax tablets where like it was wax and you could write in the wax and make indentations, and then there was something to like soften the wax and basically erase it so you could write in it again. And then they talked about how they created sort of parchment or some sort of paper from animal skins, but of course that was I almost can't bear to think about writing on animal skin. That just seems not palatable to me. Like it was a huge process because you basically had to like tan and stretch the skin and like process it how you would. And then you only got like maybe 16 sheets of paper out of the whole thing. So of course paper was still very, very precious. And then it talked about the advent of paper where you could take leftover rags or bits of, you know, tree bark leaves, whatever you had, and you could combine it into kind of a slurry and then use frames to pull out paper, and how eventually paper just became, I mean, and we're talking in the, I want to say the book starts in the 13 and 1400s. So, I mean, it talks about how paper came to be and how eventually paper became a commodity, and all of a sudden people could write things down and take notes, and paper was not something that was just limited to, you know, the very rich who could afford it. And also how that sort of changed things. I mean, like, if you think about it, the ability to like write things down on paper with a pencil or a pen or a quill or ink or any of those things basically took everything from what was a oral history and suddenly it became a written history, and you could create books for ledgers and accounting, and you could create sketches, you could keep notebooks about you could keep notebooks about quotes or things that you had learned. One of the things in the early chapters that they talk about quite a bit is sea voyages and how you could keep all of the navigational information that you needed, and like charts and latitudes and maps and drawings about the places you had been, and like all of this, and that every ship captain or navigator had a book that they carried with them, and sometimes the book stayed with the ship, so it went through multiple captains and multiple navigators. Anyway, it's a super interesting book. It's a little dry because it's history. And so like I read a couple chapters at a time and I ponder, and then I wait and go do something else, and then I move on. But I'm working through the book and I am finally up to like the 1600s now. So it's going to start to get more towards modern times. So it's really interesting. And as a lover of analog tools, I also, I don't talk about this much, but I write for a fountain pen and stationery blog. I have gone to fountain pen shows. So as someone who loves paper and pen and ink and color and all of these things, it was really interesting. So I had book club on Sunday, and then I finished a project, which I will show you momentarily, and I ordered yarn for a new project. So let's talk about the crafts. Today I'm mostly going to talk about knitting and spinning because that is what I have with me, and kind of progress and or on deck to show you. So today I am drinking some tea. This is from the British store in Lawrence, Kansas, which is about 45 minutes from here. It is a wonderful store with all kinds of imported teas and chocolates and all kinds of souvenirs and basically anything British. And I bought this a while ago, but this is Orange Blossom Oolong. It's a really nice smoky oolong with just a hint of orange flavor. And I brewed that up in my Always Azul pottery mug here. And the way I have come to know Always Azul is they are at the Renaissance Festival every year, and they have a variety of mugs and fun things. And this one just kind of jumped at me, and so I enjoy it, and it's keeping my tea nice and warm. And this tea will keep me hopefully awake and activated through the rest of the afternoon. It is about 1 o'clock on Monday, so I am taking a quick lunch break to chat with you, and then I will be getting back to work. That's good. So let's talk about the knits. So I have a finished object, almost. So I finished the grid gambit cowl that I was knitting. And the reason I say almost is because I finished it last night, so it is not washed and blocked. And the other thing that I need to do is I need to seam it together. So I'm going to talk about that today, but all the knitting is finished. I have not woven in the ends yet, and there is one particularly long end because I'm going to use it to seam up. So the grid gambit cowl is a pattern by Samantha Guerin, and I cannot remember if I think you can purchase it from her website, and I think I have a link in the show notes, but if it is not linked in the show notes, it means it's available on Ravelry, but not elsewhere. So that's kind of how I do things over on my blog. This is a mosaic stitch cowl, so basically mosaic stitch is slip stitch knitting, and I used 2 colors. It was written sort of to be intended to be used with handspun, and the pattern calls for DK weight. I have made a couple modifications, one of which is I'm knitting it with more sport or fingering weight. So this is what I ended up with left over. This is Madeline Tosh Pashmina, which is a merino cashmere silk, and it is in the colorway Dust Weaver, which is a gray with sort of a lavender overtone. And I would say I probably have 15, 20, 25 grams left. And that was 300 some odd yards per skein, so that's what I should have left. And then this is the leftovers of my handspun. It looks kind of all the same, but there's still some other colors in there. This is Marin's Pencils, and it is from Three Waters Farm. It is a beautiful purple and kind of neon rainbow, and I really, really love it. It was fun to spin. I did it, the way I did it is I tried to divide the braid into 2 pieces and spin it as a gradient so that it would, so things would line up. I did not succeed, as you can tell. I succeeded on the first half of the project, but not so much on the second, which means I spun the 2 halves differently, and then they didn't line up with each other. That is always something that I find tricky. It does have parts in it where the colors line up very well, and it does have parts in it where the colors do not line up very well, and I will show you the finished product and you will be able to see that, and I'll point out the point at which it kind of diverges. Anyway, so I spun that and My two issues with this game, the reason, well, okay, three issues. The reason it didn't go into the shop was, one, I love the colors. Two, there were some slubby areas. I didn't do the best job spinning it, and there were areas where there were like extra coils and it wasn't quite right, and I just didn't feel right putting that in my shop. And that it didn't line up the way I wanted it to. So like the first half was going to be like was going to be really nice, and then the second half was going to be a little bit more mishmashed. And you'll be able to see that. I don't care in the finished object, like it's fine. I love it. But that's kind of the deal. So the cowl is basically knit on the bias. It's knit from one corner all the way down to sort of the bottom. And I talked about how I did have some trouble visualizing how things were going to go. The other modification that I made is I added a couple extra repeats to charts 1 and 4, and that is because I wanted to make sure that the cowl was going to be wide enough and long enough. Because I used smaller weight yarn than the pattern called for, I used slightly smaller needles, and then because of that, obviously my gauge was not quite right, and so I didn't want to come out with a cowl that was going to be too small. So this is kind of a kerchief cowl. So the way it is designed to be worn kind of like a kerchief, and the finished object looks like this. So this is you can kind of see, it's a little hard to see because it's still curling. It hasn't been blocked. So there is kind of a square side over here and kind of a square side over here. As you can see, those are kind of straight lines there, and then those get joined in the back, and then you've got this point in the middle that's the bandana part. So it will look like this when I wear it. And I am super, super pleased. I love the way it came out. It's gorgeous. Like I said, I'm going to wash it and block it, and then I will seam the part at the back, and then I will be able to wear it. So the part that I wanted to show you that will illustrate my color thing is, so at the beginning of the color, the purple's lined up, the pink's lined up, I got some orange, I got some green, I got some blue, I got some purple, and then I kind of go back through, and then at the pink, it starts to get really hinky. Like, I get all kinds of different colors in that pink, and it doesn't flow as nicely through, and then I get a whole chunk of purple section, and then right at the end of the purple section, I'm kind of going back into blue and green. So again, I don't care, but I knew that this was going to be sort of a really nice rainbow progression here, and this was going to be a little different. It wasn't going to quite work out the same way, because like there's really no sort of almost yellow, and things are just a little weird there. So, and the pink, it gets like darker and lighter, and then darker and bluer, and so it's just a little weird, and I just wanted to be sure. Anyway. So that is the finished project. I'm sure it will grow a little bit while blocking. It was really easy. The pattern was super well written. The only issues that I had with the pattern was A, trusting myself, and B, because it was knit on the bias, I couldn't figure out like which charts needed to be modified. But a lovely viewer gave me a tip on that. And then as I kept knitting, I realized what needed to be done when I got there. So again, it's not quite per pattern, but that is not the pattern designer's problem at all. It was beautifully written. It was perfect. It has written instructions and charts. I used the charts, but basically once you get the hang of the pattern, for me, I didn't even need to really use the pattern that much. And I ended up adding and subtracting a few stitches in weird places to make things come out the way I wanted them to come out, and they weren't specifically part of her pattern. But overall, it looks like her pattern, and so this is the finished project. And then I will, like I said, I will wash it. I will wash it, block it, seam up the back, which is why I left an incredibly long tail where I finished here. So this is what I'm going to use to seam it up, just in the white, or in the dust weaver, the like gray lavender, because I thought that would, it should kind of hide in the I-cord edging pretty easily when I go ahead and seam it up. And then basically it will be done, and I'll take some pictures. So that is a finished object, and I'm really pleased. It took me about a month to knit, which does not really represent the actual knitting time on it. It's just because I was doing a little bit here and there in between other things. I did not devote any like full effort to it. But it was a lovely knit. I really enjoyed it. I would totally knit it again with some of my hand spun. Maybe I will as a gift. So that is that project done and dusted. So the second project that I have on the needles, and I didn't get a ton of work done on this, you'll see it's only an inch or two more than it was last time, is I'm working on another charity hat. This is the June hat from Kilburn Woolens. If you want to learn more about the pattern, I actually did like a pretty in-depth explanation last time about the whole pattern collection. So I'm not going to go into that this time, but it is the June hat pattern from Kelburn Woolens. It is a free pattern on Ravelry, and I believe you can get it for free on their website. I have linked to the blog post where they talk about it. Basically, it was intended as a 2-color stripy hat, and so it looks like this. And I have been turning it into a multicolor stripy hat where I pick like a main color that I have enough of for the kind of the brim and the slipped stitches up the side and whatnot, and then I am using little leftover scraps, and so you can see I'm using like different colors of green in here, and so last time I think I was like right about here, and so I knit a little bit more yesterday, but I really only knit on this yesterday. My knitting this week, like I said, was pretty interrupted. On Tuesday and Wednesday I just didn't feel like doing anything, and so I laid on the couch, and actually one of the nights I fell asleep, and then I went to bed early with my husband, and usually after he goes to bed is like my knitting time, listening to books, whatever I'm doing, and so I just didn't because I wasn't feeling it. So I want to finish up this hat this week. I'm sure I want to do a couple more. I had sort of designated April and May as, March and April as my finish up whips and my knit for charity. So I am still working on my niece's blanket. I did not bring that today because it looks a couple repeats, like 8, 16, 24 rows different, about the same. I finished the 3rd ball and joined the 4th, so I'm officially halfway done with the knitting on that. So my plan is to work on that as much as I can in the next month, and maybe do some more of these hats. I would love to use up more stash and get more hats ready for donation for the fall. And then my next knit is something that I figured out yesterday, so I will talk about that in just a second. I should say one of the things that I'm doing in this next week, I will certainly finish this hat and probably start another one, is I am going to be doing the Knit for Food Knitathon. That is, I've done this is my 5th year, and it is a knitting marathon to raise money for food instability and food scarcity for folks basically primarily in the United States, because it is donations to 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So the whole thing is organized by Laura Nelkin. She is a designer and she started this during the pandemic, and so this is our 5th year running, and we have raised, I believe, over $1.5 million, or we will certainly be over $1.5 million by this time. We have grown every year. We have raised $250,000 most years, so we're between 1.25 and 1.5. We are already up to, I think, $300,000, and we usually double in the last week, so that is really exciting. Basically what it is we knit for 12 hours, and we fundraise, and all of the money raised, 100% of the money raised goes to 4 organizations, which is Team No Kid Hungry, Meals on Wheels, World Central Kitchen, and this always happens to me. I always forget the 4th. Whichever one it is. 4 food causes. Feeding America. Okay, so those are the 4 causes that we raise money for. Basically, whatever we raise, it gets divided 4 ways. All that money goes straight to the cause. Nobody takes anything of it. It is a huge volunteer effort. And so that is what we do. I have done this in the past. Also, many of you are thinking, gosh, why are you doing that? Because you have been talking about tendinitis. You are right. I thought long and hard about whether or not I was going to do this year. And what I decided is that I am with them in spirit, and I really didn't want to miss the chance to fundraise for such a wonderful cause. And if I don't knit all 12 hours, I'm going to be honest about it. I'm not going to knit all 12 hours. Technically, I haven't knit all 12 hours in the past. I mean, if I'm really being honest, because I have stopped and taken breaks to do things like sew or spin or other things. I am going to craft to the best of my ability, and I am going to participate in the Knit for Food programming, and I might knit in public a little bit, because part of the push for this year is to also like knit out in your community and find people in your local community who are knitting. But honestly, to me, the main point is to raise funds. I set myself a $500 fundraising goal. I have vastly exceeded it. And thanks to some of you, I should say that. Thank you to anyone who has donated. This year, unfortunately, this year more than ever, I think we're going to be needing, there are going to be more people relying on these organizations to provide them with food. I I don't want to get political, but I do think there are going to be more people than ever who are going to need this, and food insecurity is one of those things that makes me incredibly angry, because this world produces way more food than we could eat, and to me it is, I mean, I get angry at home when we run out of bread, because I feel like we should be able to have enough bread to eat. Like, we should not have to like wait until the next grocery store day to go to bread. And I mean, that is like the stupidest argument ever, because we are incredibly privileged and we do not have problems finding groceries. But like, nothing makes me angrier than somebody not having a meal, because for any reason. There is no reason for anybody in this world to go hungry. This is a cause I support. I already support World Central Kitchen on my own time. I also have done work with another organization called Lasagna Love, where you bake a lasagna once a month and share it with a family in need. So this is kind of one of my pet causes. It is the only thing that I fundraise for during the year. All of which is, suffice it to say, I'm going to put a link below. Please do not feel obligated. This is absolutely 100% voluntary. I just wanted to tell you about what I am doing, and a really great cause where I know, because we have proof. Laura Nelkin sends us copies of the checks. She sends us copies of the thank you letters she receives acknowledging her donations. So this is 100% above board way to donate to a good cause. And if you don't want to donate through the Knit for Food campaign, because I will say the Knit for Food campaign is on givebutter.com, and I don't believe, based on your donations to Knit for Food, I don't believe they actually count as 501c3 tax-deductible donations. Please feel free to donate on your own to these organizations, or anything you would like to do. Drop food off at your local food pantry, those kinds of things. Like this is just I want to raise awareness that this is a thing, and this is my personal little bugaboo and espoused cause. So I will put a note down below, a link to donate if you want to donate to my team. I appreciate all of those of you who have donated in the past, and I will come back next Monday with a little bit of a report on what I have done. My plan actually is to start piecing that negative space quilt, and I'm going to work on as many charity hats as I can, because that seems like a great thing to do during a charity knit-a-thon. And like I said, my spirit is there even if my arms and hands aren't for the whole time. I definitely will be knitting a good chunk of the day. So I've already meal planned ahead so that like I don't have to stop and cook. So I have everything set to take the day and spend it, thinking about the cause, working for the cause. So let's do a really short spinning recap for you, and then I will let you go because I'm almost at 30 minutes. I know I've been incredibly chatty today and also probably talking incredibly fast, and I do apologize for that. That is just something that happens when I get excited. Please feel free to slow me down on YouTube. If you are watching, you can actually adjust the speed. So if I talk too fast, feel free to slow me down some. The spin that I have finished, I'm really pleased that I finished it, is this is Candy Mountain. It is fiber that was dyed by LCB, and so she is fiber created by LCB on Instagram, and also that is her website. And this was called Candy Mountain, and it is 100% Tarhi. And it was basically neon colors and like a dark blue / purple. So I guess I'm in a phase. I'm in like an 80s phase with neon colors, maybe. So it's pinks and yellows and oranges and purples and blues, and it is really, really fun. It has not been washed yet, but my guess is it will be somewhere in the neighborhood of almost 400 yards. I got really good yardage on this one, and it's squishy, and Tarhi tends to kind of puff up, so it would make nice socks, although it's not superwash. It would make a wonderful shawl, hat, any of those things, and it will be going up in the shop. So I'm going to wash it as soon as we're done talking here, and hopefully I'll have that up in the shop later this week. I will also be posting it on Instagram so you can see it. So that is the finished spin, which means it's time for a new spin. And I decided this time I'm going to do a combo spin with some of the things that I bought when I went to the spinning retreat in February. I went to a spinning silk retreat in February, and one of the things that they talked about was making your silk mileage. Silk generally is more expensive and it spins very finely. And there was some talk about making your silk mileage go a little bit further by combining a luxury fiber with a non-luxury fiber. So that doesn't mean like rough and whatever, but combining something like merino with silk. And so basically I have decided to do a combo spin where I'm going to spin two quantities, each on their own bobbins, and then I'm going to ply them together. So the silk piece of this is hand-dyed roving Tessa silk, 3 ounces from Blackwater Treasures in the colorway Brilliant Spring. And this is crazy bright green. Sorry, I should have taken this out of the bag, but I didn't. This is crazy bright green, 100% pure Tessa silk. And it looks like some of the silk took the colors in different ways. I mean, she probably used a couple different green colorways. It looks like there's like a swampy or olive green, and then like a bright spring green, and then maybe like a real light like celery green. And so it's a variety of different things. And then there are sections that look not quite undyed, but certainly with less dye. Although it might be undyed. I can't tell if it's, yeah, there are some spots in here that are, it's not white, but I'm just not sure that the base was pure white to start with. It looks very cream colored. So my plan is to spin that on one bobbin. I have 3 ounces of this, and we'll see how far it spins. And then I have a 4-ounce braid I'm going to combine it with, and I'm going to hold these up together for just a second. This is Tarhi, and so I'm going to combine these two together, and my hope is that it's going to create kind of a barber poled, silky green, beautiful spring color. So this green is from Treasure Goddess Yarn, and she is a friend and also one of my favorite dyers, and that's who hosted the retreat. So that is some of why the fiber comes there. This is her 100% Tarhi, 4 ounces, and it's in the colorway Landlubber. So hers is a little bit darker in green. It's definitely got some olive. It's got some lighter tones, some foresty tones, and so I think that's going to go really nicely with this. I bought these so that they would coordinate together, and I don't actually know which one I'm going to spin first. I might spin the silk first, I might spin the Tarhi first, I don't know. I'm basically going to spin all of this on one bobbin, all of this on another bobbin, and I'm going to ply until I run out. So obviously this one will likely run out sooner, although I'm not 100% sure, because silk can spin fairly fine, and if I end up spinning the silk fairly fine, and I don't spin it as finely as I spin this, I may end up, my guess is I'll end up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 7 ounces of spun yarn, and then I'll just have some leftovers of this, which I will ply up with some of my leftover. I have tons of little leftover balls, because basically I have spun differently over the years. I'll talk about this in just a second. So I have lots of little balls of yarn left over from when these look almost exactly the same because they're all purples. And actually that would be nice with green. Maybe that will go there. So I have spun in different ways over the years. For a really long time, I would spin all of my singles onto one bobbin. And well, so I guess in the beginning I spun onto 2 bobbins, and I was always frustrated that I had leftover bits. And in the early days, I wasn't weighing and I wasn't watching carefully. And so sometimes I would have a lot left over on one bobbin, and leftover fiber kind of annoys me because especially, well, there are 2 things. One, if I'm spinning for myself, I want every last inch of the fiber because I'm probably going to use it in a project. And 2, basically the same thing. If I'm spinning for something that I'm putting up in my shop, I want every last inch of the fiber because you're using it for a project and I want to give you the most yardage that I can. So in the beginning, I was splitting between 2 bobbins, but I was always frustrated by what was left behind. Then for a really long time, I would spin everything on one bobbin, and then I would take it off and I would ply it into a center pole cake. Like I would basically put it on my skein winder, and I would develop a cake, and then I would ply from both the inside and the outside of the ball. And this was a great method for 0% waste because I would always just spin basically right to the end where it met in the middle, and then I'd have a little loop at the end, and that would be it. The problem with that is that as your singles are very energized when you spin them, and when you do a center pole ball, it has a tendency to snag, and sometimes it gets caught on each other, and sometimes it looks like yarn barf, but even worse yarn barf than yarn barf, like when the skein of yarn you get from the craft store barfs, because that's just like a bunch of the stuff inside, but it doesn't usually like get all tangled up and knotted on itself and sometimes felted together. But when you're using hand spun singles, sometimes that's what happens. So then I was frustrated because I was losing like that little bit at the center that was getting like so nasty and tangled up, that I stopped that method. The other thing is I read some articles on the fact that when you ply from the inside and the outside of the ball, your tension is different on either on those two singles, and so sometimes they don't ply as evenly as if you ply from like two sources, because you've got the really tightly, densely packed singles at the center, and then you've got the looser and larger packed singles at the outside, and so the twist it's not quite the same, and it doesn't ply quite the same. So that's not why I gave it up. I gave it up because I was losing that extra bit to snarl, and that was making me angry. So then I switched back to 2 bobbins, and I've just been more careful about dividing, and I still end up with this little bit, but honestly, if this is 10 yards at the end, and that just doesn't get me. I mean, it's a few grams for each of these, because these are two separate spins. I basically always ply until I run out of one bobbin, and then whatever is left in the other bobbin I take off. And then during the Tour de Fleece, I plied up a whole bunch of my leftovers into a couple skeins together, and so I'm just saving these because I will add them to something else. And maybe I will add them to the green when I finish with this, because I know I'll have some left over, and I will wind that off so I can use it later. Or honestly, I might just finish plying it with some of the other stuff that I have when I'm plying, and then I can just cut it there. So, and not include that part with the skein that's going out to people. That will just be a little bit for myself. So this is a spin that will go in my shop. I'm just really pleased to kind of try it. My guess is it will take me 3 to 4 weeks, because it's been taking me 2 to 2.5 weeks on average to do a skein of yarn, and so that's double that. So I'm excited to get started and excited to try it and maybe share it with you guys. It's destined to go in the shop. So I think that's probably enough for today. Oh, I didn't talk about what's next on my needles. That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm really out of order today. I'm sorry. I'm trying to like shove everything in and also keep an eye on the tab at work. And okay, so what's next on my needles? For this week, I am planning to just work on charity hats, because I think that's great. It kind of goes along with my theme of working to raise money for a cause and support a cause. And those charity hats will be donated in the fall to a variety of causes, some of which include Knit the Rainbow. There is a yarn store that I used to work for a little bit in doing their marketing in Oklahoma that hands out hats on Halloween to support families of kids with special needs. And then I also have a couple other places that I could donate hats if I wanted to. So my plan is to work on that for this week. This past weekend, I chatted with my niece and nephew about their birthday sweaters for this year. And I have told you this before. I have a niece who will be 12 and a nephew who will be 8. Sorry. Nephew who will be 9, and most years I knit them a sweater for their birthdays, and up until now it has not been really that much of a lift because they were tiny human beings, but of course they are getting larger and larger. I think my niece may almost be ready for an extra small in women's sizes, so like they're definitely getting more people sized, and so I talked to them and I wanted to give them some choices, because so I love knitting for my niece and nephew, and I will knit for them as long as they would like to wear the things that I make. I also understand that as one hits the teenage years, sometimes homemade is not what you want. Sometimes what you want is to fit in with the other children. I mean, middle school is a terrible time. Kids are cruel to each other, especially with social media these days, but even when I was growing up, kids are cruel to each other, and sometimes all you want to do is fit in and not be noticed. And of course, then you grow up into an adult and you're like, great, I can do anything I want, and many of us embrace that wholeheartedly. But I do understand that that is a thing, and so I am trying to make it clear to the children that if they are not interested in hand knits, that is totally okay. Please let me know before I do it. But I'm also trying to bring them into, now that they're older, I'm trying to give them a little bit more choice as to what the knits look like, because I feel like that's a really good way to get them something that they'll want to wear. And you know, they're getting towards adults, it's important to give them some choice. I do not let them go hog wild, because I realize 1 year Miles detailed to me a very extensive scene that he wanted me to depict on one of his sweaters, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if Aunt Laura can do that. So the questions that I asked this year are the questions that I've asked in previous years, which is, would you like a cardigan or pullover? And she asked for a cardigan, and he asked for a pullover, and then did a really cute thing where he wanted it to go over his head and pop his arms out. I know it's less cute when I do it, but it's really cute when an 8-year-old does it. And then I asked them about colors, and she immediately told me what her favorite colors were. And he kind of hemmed and hawed for a minute, and then he said, could I have a themed sweater? And I said, themed? And he said, yes, like my Nintendo sweater. Now, for those of you who have been with me for a while, I don't remember what episode it is. Maybe I'll stick it in the show notes. 2 years ago, my nephew was super into Mario and Luigi. Technically, Luigi was his favorite. And I might have done it to surprise him. I might not have even asked him. I think I asked my sister. He told me Luigi was his favorite. And so I knit him a plain sweater. What I ended up using was Tin Can Knits flax. And then there was a creator on Ravelry who had created some charts for a lot of Nintendo characters. They were not selling this pattern. They had used it for their own use, and then they had sort of shared it to make it available to others who wanted to. And I am not going to link them because I do not want to out them, because I'm afraid that Nintendo would go after them. But they had made this chart public, and so I found I found basically it was Mario. I used Mario, but I did it in green like Luigi, and then I did some of the other motifs, one of the other motifs on the sleeve. I think one of the like cactus or flower or pipe things, and I duplicate stitched it. And it was such a hit that he wants another one. And it was really sweet. And so, I mean, that just kind of melted my heart a little bit, because I thought maybe he'd outgrow it by now, but like, you know, like maybe he would just want like a plain sweater. But no, he wants something themed. And so I asked him what he wanted, and he said his very favorite is Kirby right now, and that's also a Nintendo character. But Kirby is a big ball who eats lots of other things, and so I was pretty sure I could find some kind of a graph chart, but I was kind of struggling to figure out how I was going to make this work. And then the other thing he said was Minecraft, and I was like, oh, I bet there are so many patterns on Ravelry for Minecraft, and there are. And there is a pattern by a Norwegian designer that is a yoked sweater, and in it she has charts of like a lot of the different faces in Minecraft. And so Minecraft is, if you don't know, I mostly live under a rock because I don't have children. So Minecraft is a game where basically you can exist in the world or you can build your world, but it is all, it looks almost like 8-bit graphics. So it's all like basically charted, and they're all blocks. So it's perfect for knitting, because knitting tends to look like, you know, we have more trouble with like perfect circles because you got to figure out how many rows and kind of stagger it. And really it's actually like pixels, but a game based in pixels is perfect for something charted. I found a sweater that actually has charted the little characters and Minecraft are in the yoke. And then it's a pretty plain sweater, and it goes up to size 12. So I am knitting the 8 to 10 size, and I ordered all the yarn for that. So I think once I'm done with well, okay, so I ordered the yarn yesterday. It should arrive in the next few days. And I was originally going to knit Roxy's sweater first because she's older, therefore her sweater is bigger, and I wanted to get the bigger one out of the way first. But I have not quite found the pattern that I'm settling on. She's at kind of an interesting state where she'll be 12. So technically she still kind of fits into the children's patterns, like the larger children's patterns. But there is not as much of a selection, and a lot of them are very cutesy, and I don't know that that's the look that I'm going for right now for her, and I don't know it's something she'd want. So I'm kind of starting to look at some of the women's patterns, and I haven't decided whether I want to do cables or lace or color work. I might do, well, she wants a cardigan, but I could do a color work yoke and steek it, but of course I'd have to do it in superwash wool, because I always knit in superwash for the kids, because they still get their clothes dirty, like, it, you know, and yeah. So, because I'm undecided on hers and I know exactly what I want to make him, and I sent the picture to my sister and she was like, oh, that's amazing, he'll love it. So, and I already know what size, whereas for her, she's, you know, like, I'm not sure whether I do 12, I'm not sure whether I do 14, I'm not sure whether I do extra small for women. Like, she's not an extra small, because I gave my sister the chest, usually an extra small measurements are 28 inches, and my sister's like, she's not there yet. So, and not that I'm also trying to, I should preface this by saying I'm not trying to knit like a sophisticated knit for my niece that would not be appropriate for her age range. I'm also aware that like cutesy child stuff when you're 12 is not necessarily always what you want. Like for me, I always wanted to be older. I don't know that she does, but for me, I always wanted like more mature things than, you know, like I didn't want it to look like kids stuff at that age. Anyway, I know I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. So that is the next cast on. My plan is not to do it this week and this weekend to kind of devote that to charity knitting. But then the following week, I think I'm probably going to go ahead and cast on for Miles' sweater. And then I'll still do some charity knitting and I'll still be working on my niece's blanket. But that will let me get a sweater done ahead of my summer travels, and so I'll only have one to do like August-September timeframe, which is great because I could not crank out two, especially I don't want to tax my wrist like that. I want to give myself a couple months for each sweater so that I have plenty of time. Okay, now I am really done. I'm going to let you go. It's 44 minutes, so I'm going to say I love you all. Thank you all for watching and listening to me rant and ramble. We are at 515 episodes, and I also want to say we are hovering like right around 960 subscribers, and I might get to 1,000 subscribers this year, which I realize I've been doing this for like 10 years, and so like you are a small but mighty audience, and I'm very excited about the prospect of hitting 1,000 subscribers this year. So have a lovely week ahead. Enjoy your crafting. Happy knitting, happy spinning, sewing, embroidering, anything that you do that's crafty. Happy sipping, and I'll see you next week. Bye.